Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining me. This is week 14. We're getting down to the wire, but we just got a couple of chapters left, in the textbook. This one is on the Proteus effect. And as you probably notice in this particular chapter, it really kind of takes a kind of an academic approach to some research papers, I guess, that explore this effect as social media and various forms of electronic communications that has an impact on how you perceive yourself. So I think you could probably think of it, and I've thought of it as I look through this material about how some of the environments that you might check out or spend time in might actually influence how you conduct yourself in real life. So kind of an interesting, they call it transference. How does it influence you as you interact online as well as in a face-to-face kind of environment? So let's get into this. They kind of define. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see that first slide? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Okay, so Proteus effect. So the first part of this defines what exactly is the Proteus effect. So this Greek god Proteus can change his appearance, and I guess they refer to this as being able to morph into something else, something different. And the idea of, I guess, this Proteus effect starts to come into play when we spend time on these CMCs, and especially in kind of the virtual world, in environments where you might have avatars, and there's a kind of a replication of yourself as you want to depict yourself in this kind of virtual environment. And so how does that interaction between who you are in real life and who you project yourself in these virtual environments, how does that impact how you might ultimately kind of be reflected in the face-to-face world? So it's kind of a interesting influence, one versus the other. And it's kind of a I guess it would be like a how do you describe this? Like, kind of, how does it impact you? It's not like you're impacting the avatar. How does the avatar then in turn kind of impact you? And that's kind of the interesting aspect of this Proteus effect. So the Proteus effect, appearance affects communications. So a reliable phenomenon, a relatively large effect. Online, it affects communications and relationships. Offline, it affects face-to-face communication. So this is kind of the foundation upon which a lot of this early kind of research in this area took place. So one of the examples that they talk about, you know, with these avatars is an example of, you know, like just the appearance of the avatar. And I'm not sure if you folks have played around with any of these sort of virtual environments. I mean, they're much more prolific now, especially with things like, you know, esports and online gaming and, you know, those kinds of environments. I personally, I don't, I don't have that much time to spend on those kinds of environments, but, you know, early on, this is probably back in the maybe early, late 90s, there were a couple of them that I sort of explored. One was Second Life, and even before Second Life, there was a platform called the Palace, and it was the Palace was kind of like a virtual chat environment, but it provided a graphic interface that allowed you to pick an avatar. And nowadays, you know, it's pretty sophisticated where you can actually design the avatar to be kind of your chosen alter ego. But back then, when I was playing around with the Palace, you know, there were a set number of avatars you could pick, and then you could proceed through the various. They call them worlds. Like you can go from kind of page to page, and there was a different sort of graphic background, and your avatar would be would be representative of yourself. And I think I picked at that time like a little caricature of a ninja, and that was my kind of character. And again, it was kind of that choice of alter ego. And then I think similarly in Second Life, you know, you could get more flexibility with the kind of avatars that you could choose. I chose one that was for the most part similar to what I appear to be in real life. So, you know, I didn't go sort of overboard. Wanted to not confuse myself, so I did that. But you know, in Second Life, you could actually choose, you know, another gender, or you could choose, you know, various body shapes. So what the I guess early research kind of found out that, you know, depending on what kind of avatar you picked, and in this case, you know, if it was an attractive avatar, there would be a tendency to want to, you know, be closer or interact closer with somebody else that's on the, you know, on that particular platform. And then there would be probably an indication of more interaction, more talkative, you know, maybe more confident, friendly, extroverted, and the resulting environment would invite the sharing of more personal information. And I think for the most part, that's kind of obvious, right? It's kind of obvious, but from an academic standpoint, you know, you want to maybe do some research and actually have a sample pool of people and see you know, if from a statistical standpoint, you know, this is in fact true. And that's what it was found early on, that, you know, attractive avatars kind of attract people, and less attractive avatars will result in, you know, standing further apart and fewer self-disclosures. So avatar attractiveness affects subsequent behavior. So now this is a kind of the indication that, you know, how you appear impacts, you know, the resulting sort of interest level and ability to communicate. And then so this is more research talking about how sort of this kind of bargaining environment. Different appearing avatars negotiate the split of $100. Um, you know, you have the comparison of, the face-to-face negotiation, and then the avatar appearance affects the face-to-face negotiation. So this starts to kind of reveal the impact of how you might negotiate given, an avatar that might be more conducive to interacting. And then that in turn might give you the self-confidence to then be more confident in a negotiation in a face-to-face environment. So that's the kind of the interaction between, one experience and how it transfers into the face-to-face environment. So these are the four kind of key influences on this Proteus effect. So you have, the presence, and we've talked about presence, how accessible are you, in that environment. The next one is identity. How do you identify with your, obviously, maybe in this case, the avatar or your replication of who you want to be in that environment? That becomes kind of the identity. There's the effect of de-individuation, which is, I think we talked about in the last chapter about how, being a part of a sort of a social group or a community tends to less emphasize the individualness, and it's a de-individuation, and that sort of influences the impact of how you function, sort of in these environments. Then how does that, in the fourth case, how does that transfer back to yourself in the real world? So these are some of the things that what this chapter sort of explores is, the impact of your choosing any of these kinds of environments, and then how does that then have a reverse effect on you as you conduct your, yourself in a face-to-face real world environment. So this graphic is really kind of depicts this sort of shift, right? It says immersive presence triggers a social identity that shifts to a virtual one in alignment with social stereotypes. So you have this on the bottom, you have this personal identity, and then you have this learned cognitive schema, and then as you interact with various, social groups, whether it's in school or work or family, you have this sort of social identity. Then as you go into these virtual environments, these like immersive presence influences the virtual identity, and then the social identity also shifts into this virtual identity. So, what is it that all of this stuff kind of mixed together? How does this end up influencing who you are? And, if you think about it, this research is something that might try to explain some of the impacts that you might have, in everyday life. But if you think about it, this is a natural course of your evolving person, right? Who you are as you evolve over the course of time. So as many of you are, students, and whether it's your professor or whether it's your colleagues or if it's your family, things that they say will ultimately kind of give you thought on who you are or who you want to be. I don't know if you folks have heard this, but in the working world, there's this sort of saying. You might hear it, as you get into the work environment. But perception is reality, and the idea of perception as reality is that you may think that you have a sense of what your reality is, but if something that might be outside of your control impacts how a person might think about you, whether you're, let's say, friendly or not friendly, or maybe you're dominant or not dominant, or introvert or not, or extrovert. You may not know it directly, but there might be some perceptions that others have. And those perceptions, whether you know it or not, can become a reality. And I say this because, this is from kind of like firsthand experience. You don't really know what other people think. Sometimes it might be revealed, and when it does get revealed, you might be surprised. But that's probably a result of some of that perception becoming reality. So again, this chapter sort of doesn't say it outrightly, but that's the dynamics that are happening, whether in CMC or just in real life in general. That's kind of the evolution of all of our persons, our identity, as we grow over time. You guys are all young, so you're sort of kind of getting a kind of an introduction to this. But as you go through school and get into work, you'll see more of this. So this is kind of a good kind of breakdown of some of the impacts that will result in this idea of transference and how you ultimately become. They call it Proteus effect, but it's probably a course of the natural course of kind of growing up. So this is again another kind of graphic of the sort of the personal identity as it shifts and changes and gets influenced in the CMC environment, right? And then you have all these in the CMC environment impacts of the individuation, social stereotypes, the immersive presence, these virtual identities, and then this transference back into kind of the physical environment. And it's almost like they show it sort of as a path from left to right, but it actually kind of is circular. It kind of goes right back to ultimately who you are. So, they do some kind of examples of further research, how this sort of Proteus effect can influence creative thinking. So, there were these 3 groups, 15-minute brainstorming sessions. The control group meets face-to-face, and then 2 groups meet as avatars. And they didn't really have any kind of like pictures of what these avatars look like. I'd be kind of interested in seeing, what an avatar looks like if they were supposed to reflect creative-looking inventor avatars versus normal-looking non-inventor avatars. But that's what the groups were split up as. And then the conclusion from this particular research was that in the environment where there were sort of these inventor avatars, and again, this is just like how an avatar is presented. It doesn't necessarily change the person behind the avatar. It's just the appearance of the avatar is kind of depicted as an inventor. So that environment had more ideas and more unique ideas. And then you know, in the face-to-face and follow-up, those particular folks that had the inventor avatars consequently had more ideas and more unique ideas. So there's this, sort of transference that was, I kind of like was influenced, by the appearance of the inventor avatar. So you sort of embrace that appearance, and then that transference was taken into the real world face to face. So that's another experiment that they conducted. And then they also did some kind of exploring the Proteus effect with gender. So one study, you had males and females assign either a female or a male avatar, and they were kind of like tasked to solve these math problems. And then again, this is kind of I guess gender specific, but the male avatars, regardless of whether they were the person behind the avatar was a male or female, performed better, regardless of the participant. And then in the second study, you have female avatars, highly sexualized or non-sexualized, get offline, complete sort of this rape myth acceptance scale, and then the sexualized avatars scored higher on the rape myth scale. So again, the conclusion from this particular study is that the avatar, depending on how it is depicted, influences how the person thinks about these particular topics. And then they continue to look at other kind of studies and experiments using the Proteus effect with race. So, play as an African American or white as an avatar, high score on embodied presence, influence of racial stereotypes. In the game, the actual hurting of your enemy was typically the other race. Okay, so kind of a experiment showing that there's, depending on the avatar you have, the probability of your inflicting pain on somebody else would be more probable if it was of a different race. And then after game, assign more difficult puzzle shapes. That one, again, I guess depending on the race would influence how the personnel or the participants would respond based on these puzzle shapes. Another experiment was, kind of the body image, and this one put sort of obese avatars versus normal avatars, and it kind of measured the how they responded to healthiness of virtual products. They rated tastiness, and the obese group rated soda tastier, food, apples, as healthier. Embodying obese avatar affects food perception. So no difference in shopping or purchasing behaviors, but there was obviously difference depending on what kind of avatar you had as your sort of virtual representation. And then another experiment was the virtual gym. You have older adults, physical exercise, a younger or older avatar do real physical exercise, additional time to practice after the routine. What they found was, as far as avatar age, no effect on physical effort or step count. Younger avatars participants, the younger avatar participants perceived more effort. So in this particular case, it might not have been as obvious, from one type of avatar to another type of avatar in terms of age and how it impacted or influenced your physical ability to exercise. And that sounds about, that sort of makes sense, right? Because as a young person, you probably already have an exercise routine, so you wouldn't be as impacted or influenced, if you were depicted as an older person as an avatar. And then similarly, as an older person being depicted as a younger person in the virtual environment, you probably already have a routine that you are physically capable of doing. So it probably wouldn't transfer as much, in that kind of virtual environment. So the virtual gym, you have normal and muscular avatars, complete routine followed by free exercise. The normal looking avatar, more active than muscular avatars. A female with normal avatars, the higher self efficacy and confidence. And then another sort of experiment, with walking speed, this vision test with physical or virtual screening, walk to or walk from a test room and you record the walking speeds. There was no difference in control. The younger avatar group, older group was slower walking back from the test room. So walk slow only in the first half of the hallway, no measurable difference in the second half. So no real conclusive evidence of kind of the transference, in this particular example of young avatar versus old avatar and, just the walking speed. Okay. And then this other research example, healthy participants view avatars and are tasked with moving their hand. Okay. And this is kind of the example of leveraging some of these virtual environments for stroke recovery. The avatar arm changes soft, pliable human skin to stone. The participant arm movement lower in stone, participant rate, arm heavier, colder, stiffer. So I guess neurological response to stone appearance. Again, these research, I guess, environments looking at how you can help perhaps somebody that's recovering from a stroke, look at how they might respond if their avatar had a more of a pliable, human skin versus one that's a stone. And I guess with the stone example, you have a heavier, colder, stiffer kind of arm reaction. And I think the idea is that, maybe the results from this research could help be applied to stroke recovery, and see if transference would help, in the rehabilitation. So the, sort of like the analysis of all of this, the Proteus effect is complicated but consistent. Cognitive, attitudinal, behavioral effects. Specifics differ, but effects recurrent across studies. Influence of social stereotype on communications, affect both on and offline. So, the conclusion here is that, there is an effect of this sort of transference, that we might have kind of this reciprocal reaction to, impacting how we perceive ourselves in everyday life. So it is a sort of a circular kind of environment. And as I said earlier, this is sort of a byproduct of just, taking the inputs that you have as you go through life and assessing how much of that influences who you perceive yourself to be. And whether you're doing it in real life or whether you're doing it online, has an impact on you. And then finally it says, avatars activate thoughts, attitudes, behavior, stereotypes. So again, in these virtual environments, there is a two-way kind of impact of the avatar, the interactions that you have in that environment, and how it then transfers back to how you perceive yourself. The Proteus effect requires presence, identity, performance, de-individuation, and transference. External identity cues like gender, skin color, obesity, age. These also impact, how you might perform in the virtual environment, but it also has an impact on how you take what you've perhaps just experienced in the virtual environment back into the real world environment. And then social stereotypes affect identity, attitude, and behavior. And, that's basically, in a nutshell, what this chapter explores, right? So unlike some of the previous chapters, that talked about, like in the case of groups and communities and person, I mean, it's looking at how you interact in these particular environments. But in this particular chapter, the Proteus effect, it really kind of talks about how you have this, again, reciprocal impact that results from your interacting in an environment as an avatar, and then basically creating some characteristics or transferring some of those characteristics from your avatar into your own personal face-to-face reality. So it's kind of a good exercise to think about how, as you go through any kind of CMC and as you spend more time, in these kinds of environments, what is the transference impact on yourself? And again, for any of you that want to explore this more, it's probably, more of a research activity, and something that you might want to maybe think about from a, if you want to pursue any kind of like a graduate study in this area. But that's pretty much the the extent of this chapter. I think the next chapter is somewhat similar. Talks about the kind of like the actor network. So we'll kind of explore that next week. But for now, I mean, are there any kind of questions about this particular topic? I know it's a little bit abstract, I think, but I think it is pertinent. But again, it is more indicative of the virtual environments. So if you are getting involved with more immersive kinds of environments, that's probably where you want to be a little cognizant of, how these Proteus effects might influence you, as you take on that particular role in that virtual environment, and then how does that then influence how you are in your, sort of regular day-to-day environment. Any kind of questions about this particular topic? No? So, again, like I mentioned, this is a little shorter chapter, only because it is really kind of a survey of some of the research that has gone on in this area. And, it's stuff to kind of like think about. Again, my personal experience with this is probably more in the early sort of virtual environments, but I think, as folks spend more time in some of these virtual environments, it's just a good thing to be aware of the potential for these transferences to occur. So if there are any questions, I'll let you guys go a little early today, and wish you all a great Thanksgiving. And I will, see you all back here next Tuesday, because on Thursday it'll be Thanksgiving, and we won't have class. But we'll be back next week. I guess it's going to be December 3rd. So until then, you guys all take care. Have a good long weekend.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
early Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.